So, hello and welcome back to Send Searchlights for this month. As many of our regular guests will know, my name is Polly and I work as an educational advisor with a background in teaching in the primary sector in the UK, and also previously was an assistant head teacher and inclusion lead. Today, I'm joined by my wonderful colleague Debbie, whose role is a trainer within the practice team. She also brings a wealth of SEND experience, so it's great to have her with us. Unfortunately, Debbie is having a few technical issues this morning, which means that her camera and sound are not in sync. So we will persevere for today. And thank you for bearing with us, but we will make sure this is fixed for next time. And for those of you who are used to seeing Emma join us, she is actually working in Madrid today, so is sadly unable to join us, but I know will be thinking of us and will catch up at a later point. The usual reminders for housekeeping before we get started. Please do stay on mute, but if you do need any clarification on today's topic, pop your questions in the chat box so that we don't miss those. And as always, any new questions for future webinars can be submitted using the registration form, which will be sent out to you after the webinar, along with the recording of this one and any links to resources that we might mention today. So today our focus is taking a bit of a twist. We are going to look at inclusion from the perspective of our more able pupils, or perhaps known as gifted and talented students. Now, we appreciate that terminology differs across the world. We use the terminology of giftedness, which is broadly applicable in many international contexts. We recognise that this may no longer be in use in some regions. For example, some schools still refer to high achievers as gifted and talented, but this descriptor is no longer used in the UK by the Department for Education. And there is actually no official replacement term, nor a fixed percentage of pupils who are considered to be gifted and talented as there was in the past. Many schools use the terms more able or most able. In the UK here, Ofsted also use those descriptors. Others use high attainer, high current attainer, or greater depth. And then finally, other settings prefer the term high learning potential, or HLP, in recognition of the fact that most are the high attainers. So lots of terminology that encompasses the same sort of thing. So let's move on to our content today, and I will pass over to Debbie, who is going to consider our first question.
Thank you, Polly. Hello, and our first question today is, how do we identify more able students? Here in the UK in the late 1990s and early 2000s, the Department for Education introduced the term gifted and talented, or G&T, to describe children who were attaining at a high level in school. At that time, G&T referred to children whose attainments put them in the top 5% of their year group. Later, this was changed to the top 10%. However, percentages were not the only way, or necessarily the best way, of identifying the most able students. As we know, it is also important to consider ability alongside attainment and acknowledge that there are a difference between the two. Ability refers to a child's potential, whereas attainment shows how well a child is using their ability. Children who have a lot of potential may not actually be attaining highly, perhaps because they haven't had opportunities to excel. For example, children who come from disadvantaged families have difficult life circumstances, or have unidentified special educational needs. We also need to consider those students who have dual and multiple exceptionalities. This term is used in the UK to describe children who have both high learning potential and would be classed as having a special educational need because of a learning difficulty or a disability. It means the same thing as the term twice exceptional, or 2E, that is used in the USA and various other parts of the world. The term dual or multiple exceptionality reflects the fact that an individual may have one or more issues alongside their high learning potential. As an example, a student may have been diagnosed as having both an autism spectrum disorder and alongside exceptional cognitive abilities. This may cause frustration, adversity, and distress to the student, in turn leading on to social and emotional difficulties. It is difficult to generalise about such a diverse group, as much will depend on the type of issues experienced. These children can be experiencing intellectual strengths such as an active imagination, an extensive vocabulary, and exceptional comprehension, whilst simultaneously experiencing academic difficulties, for example, poor handwriting, poor spelling, or difficulty with phonics. These children can find challenge when carrying out simple tasks. However, they are often able to conduct more complex ones. Children with dual or multiple exceptionalities can often show emotional characteristics which can create additional barriers if left unsupported, including unrealistically high self-expectations, confusion about abilities, fear of failure, sensitivity to criticism, low self-esteem, and poor social skills. I will now hand you back to Polly, who will answer the next question.
Thank you, Debbie. It's so interesting, and like much of the SEND world, a bit of a minefield with so much to consider. Our next question comes from an inclusion lead in the UAE, who was interested to know a little bit more about a student who is gifted and talented, but has a verbal deficit of -25. So this is making reference to our CAT4 cognitive abilities assessment, where a comparison has been made between the verbal battery and non-verbal battery. So it's a really good example of how we're considering that ability with attainment. Now, it's typical for learners who are new to English to experience difficulties reasoning with words in English. And when you compare results for the verbal and non-verbal abilities, many may have a discrepancy, with their non-verbal skills often being higher. These students still may often be really hardworking, quick to learn, particularly enjoy activities that involve hands-on learning. Where they may struggle is those large group discussions, where they'll find it difficult to keep up, as they can often miss unfamiliar cultural references and can potentially confuse popular expressions. So they may often need additional prompts and reminders in literacy-related learning. However, this doesn't necessarily mean they are a low attaining student and may have many other strengths and skills. So if a student has a discrepancy between verbal and non-verbal reasoning, where their verbal score is lower, then it is worth considering whether EAL may be the reason. Is it appropriate to investigate those language, vocabulary, reading skills? Ensure that you're providing opportunities for non-traditional approaches to recording knowledge and facilitate that chunking of information to help students manage the demands of the learning and curriculum. Also providing infographic knowledge organisers or something similar really supports pre-learning and access to subject-specific vocabulary and concepts. Now, if you are making use of the CAT4 assessment, it's also important to consider the strengths that the students may be demonstrating in their other CAT4 batteries. For example, those with spatial scores at least as high or higher than their quantitative scores are likely to demonstrate particularly strong practical experimental skills. And knowing these patterns gives you an idea of who you should be keeping an eye on in the future, so demonstrating those more able abilities in areas beyond that verbal battery. There is a significant minority of children whose poor verbal skills do unfortunately mask their potential. So, for example, students who are highly spatial thinkers, so those who think first in images, they tend to excel at those STEM subjects, so science, technology, engineering and maths, and indeed do go on to have really successful careers as scientists, mathematicians and engineers. And these students are likely to have high academic ability in these particular subjects, but as already we've touched on, could potentially be your more hidden, more able students due to that verbal deficit. So definitely something to think about when considering who your more able students are. Have you got some students who are actually hiding that full potential because of that verbal battery, but actually they are still very gifted and talented in other areas? I'm now going to hand back over to Debbie, continuing on our theme, but looking at, now we've sort of thought about how to identify those students, how do we actually support those learners across the curriculum?
Thank you, Polly. Our final question today comes from a head of inclusion from the UAE, who is interested in inclusive practice for gifted and talented students and how we can best support and challenge these students. This is a great question, and those of you who use Star Reading will have access to our instructional planning reports. This report identifies skills in the learning progression that students need to learn to make best progress, and these skills can be used at any level. For example, a pupil in Year 7 with a reading age of 16 years and 6 months, together with a percentile ranking of 99, meaning that they scored greater than 99% of students nationally of the same age, right down to their month of birth, would have suitable skills suggested for them at a level that would extend their knowledge and cultivate a greater depth of understanding for them. However, there are a lot of other ways gifted and talented students can be supported, such as by tapping into their interests. Let them choose their own topics or projects to work on subjects that they feel passionate about. Group students of similar ability level together so that they can motivate each other, share ideas and good practice. Have goals for the students to achieve and involve them in setting those goals. Discuss how students can apply their knowledge in daily life, how the skills that they are learning could be used in the workplace, and also equip them with the ability to transfer knowledge across other activities and subjects. Of course, all of these perspectives can be advantageous for less able students in addition to gifted students. I will now pass you back to Polly.
Thank you, Debbie. It's great that there are so many resources available, whether you are making use of the Renaissance products and the GL assessment products, or if you're not, then looking at other resources available. So lots out there. We now move on to our illuminations, where each month we provide suggestions on next steps that might be helpful to you on your journey to maximise that support offer to your students. So thinking about the now, consider who your more able students are. What does the data say, but also how does this correlate with your contextual knowledge and teacher judgment? And also not forgetting that all-important parent and pupil voice too. Next, are you missing any students? So for example, those hidden gifted and talented learners that due to other factors, for example, dual and multiple exceptionality, as Debbie touched on earlier, may not be as obvious to you. So a little bit of digging deeper to find out if you are missing any students. And then planning for how to stretch and challenge those students. So again, Debbie gave lots of great examples of using our assessment and practice products to do this, but also just day-to-day general ways to support those students. Also, later on in the month, on 26th of November, we are excited to announce that we are hosting a webinar entitled Rethinking Giftedness, where Dr. Jean Kearns and Steve Arnold, who's the corporate head of Gifted and Talented at GEMS Education, dive into the latest research and evidence-based strategies for talent development. So this is a great follow-up to our SENS Searchlights themes today. More information on the webinar and how to sign up is on our website, so please do visit www.gl-education.com/events. However, we will make sure that this link comes to you in the follow-up email along with recording of today's session, so that you can get yourself registered and join us on that. I think it'll be really interesting, especially as a follow-up to today. Please do keep sending us your other burning SEND questions, as next month Debbie and I will continue to answer your questions related to practice and assessment, as well as sharing those all-important practical tips for your everyday practice. Emma will have returned from Madrid and be back to join us. And we're going to look at a reflection of the year. So looking back at some of the topics we've covered throughout the year, any particular highlights, and then looking forward to next year and sharing some of our future sessions with you as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. Wherever you are in the world, we hope you've had a great day, or we hope you have a good day. And we really look forward to seeing you again on the 10th of December. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.